Welcome. Today, we're diving into the concept of joint and several liability, a key principle in law that affects how responsibility is shared among multiple parties. Whether you're a business owner, a professional, or just curious about legal terms, understanding this concept can help you navigate situations where more than one person is held accountable for a debt or wrongdoing. Let's start by breaking down what liability means in a legal context and why it's important to know who is responsible when things go wrong. Liability, in simple terms, refers to the legal responsibility for one's actions or omissions. In the context of civil law, it usually means being held accountable for damages or losses caused to another party. This responsibility can arise from contracts, negligence, or other legal obligations. When more than one person is involved, the question becomes, how is this responsibility divided? That's where joint and several liability comes into play, shaping how courts and creditors pursue compensation. Joint liability means that all parties involved in a legal obligation are collectively responsible for fulfilling it. If a group signs a loan agreement, for example, each member is equally liable for the entire debt. Creditors can pursue any or all members for repayment, but typically, the group is treated as a single entity. This approach ensures that responsibility doesn't fall on just one person, but is shared among everyone involved in the agreement. Several liability, on the other hand, means that each party is only responsible for their own share of the obligation. If 3 people owe money, each is liable only for their portion. Creditors can only collect the amount owed by each individual, not the full amount from any one person. This approach limits the risk for each party, ensuring that one person isn't unfairly burdened by the actions or inability of others. Joint and several liability combines both concepts. Here, each party is individually responsible for the entire obligation, but also collectively with others. This means a creditor can pursue any one party for the full amount or all parties together. If one party pays more than their share, they may seek reimbursement from the others. This system is designed to protect the interests of the injured or owed party, ensuring they can recover the full amount owed. The concept of joint and several liability has its roots in common law, which forms the basis of legal systems in many countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom. Over time, this principle has evolved to address fairness and practicality in situations where multiple parties are involved. Courts use it to ensure that victims or creditors are not left uncompensated simply because one responsible party cannot pay. In practice, joint and several liability means that if a group is found liable for damages, the injured party can recover the full amount from any one of them. For example, if 3 people are responsible for a $30,000 debt, the creditor can demand the entire sum from just one person. That person, in turn, can seek contributions from the others. This ensures that the injured party is not left chasing multiple people for payment. Imagine 3 friends take out a loan together. Under joint and several liability, if one friend cannot pay, the lender can demand the full repayment from the other 2, or even just one of them. This protects the lender's interests, making sure they can recover their money even if one borrower defaults. The paying friend can then try to collect the unpaid share from the friend who didn't pay. In a personal injury lawsuit, if multiple parties are found responsible for causing harm, joint and several liability allows the injured person to recover the full amount of damages from any one of them. This is especially important if one party is unable to pay their share. The paying party can then seek reimbursement from the others, but the injured person is not left without compensation. The main reason for using joint and several liability is to protect the interests of the injured or owed party. It prevents a situation where someone is left uncompensated because one responsible party cannot pay. By allowing recovery from any or all parties, the law ensures that victims or creditors are made whole, even if some parties are insolvent or difficult to locate. For those held jointly and severally liable, the risk is that they may end up paying more than their fair share if others cannot pay. This can be a significant burden, especially in cases involving large sums or multiple parties. Defendants must be aware of this risk when entering agreements or participating in activities that could lead to shared liability. If one party pays more than their share under joint and several liability, they have the right to seek reimbursement from the other responsible parties. This process, known as contribution, allows the paying party to recover the excess amount paid. However, if the other parties are insolvent or unavailable, the paying party may not be able to recover their money. Parties can specify in contracts whether liability will be joint, several, or joint and several. It's important to read and understand these terms before signing any agreement. The choice of liability structure can have significant financial and legal consequences, especially if disputes or defaults arise later on. Joint and several liability is often used in tort law, where multiple parties may be responsible for causing harm. For example, in a car accident involving several drivers, each may be held liable for the full amount of damages. This ensures that the injured party is compensated, even if some drivers cannot pay their share. In contract law, joint and several liability can apply when multiple parties sign a contract together. If one party defaults, the others may be required to fulfill the entire obligation. This is common in business loans, leases, and partnership agreements where lenders or landlords want to ensure they can recover what they are owed. Some jurisdictions have modified or limited joint and several liability through statutes. For example, certain laws may cap the amount a party can be required to pay, or restrict joint and several liability to specific types of cases. These changes are often aimed at balancing fairness for both plaintiffs and defendants. In some legal systems, joint and several liability is combined with comparative fault rules. This means that each party's liability is based on their percentage of fault. However, the injured party can still recover the full amount from any one party, who can then seek contribution from the others based on their share of responsibility. Joint and several liability has faced criticism, particularly from defendants who may be required to pay more than their share. Critics argue that it can be unfair, especially if one party is only minimally at fault but ends up paying the entire judgment. As a result, some jurisdictions have reformed or limited its application in certain cases. For plaintiffs, joint and several liability offers significant advantages. It increases the likelihood of full compensation, even if some defendants are insolvent or unavailable. Plaintiffs do not have to worry about tracking down every responsible party they can recover from anyone and let the defendants sort out contributions among themselves. Defendants, however, may face the risk of paying more than their fair share, especially if co-defendants are unable to pay. This can lead to financial hardship and disputes among defendants over reimbursement. It's a key reason why understanding liability terms before entering agreements is so important. Insurance policies often address joint and several liability, especially in cases involving multiple insured parties. Insurers may cover the full amount owed by any one party, but may also seek reimbursement from co-insureds. It's important to review insurance terms to understand how liability is handled in multi-party situations. In business partnerships, joint and several liability means each partner can be held responsible for the full amount of partnership debts. This underscores the importance of choosing partners carefully and understanding the risks involved. Partnership agreements often address how liability will be shared and how disputes will be resolved. Joint and several liability is common in real estate transactions, such as when multiple buyers sign a mortgage. If one buyer defaults, the lender can pursue the others for the full amount. This protects the lender but increases the risk for co-borrowers, making it essential to understand the terms before signing. In construction, joint and several liability can apply to contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. If a project fails or causes harm, any one party may be held responsible for the full amount of damages. This encourages all parties to ensure quality and compliance, but also increases individual risk. Professionals such as lawyers, accountants, and consultants may face joint and several liability when working together on a project. If a client suffers harm due to negligence, any one professional may be held responsible for the full amount of damages, regardless of their individual level of fault. Joint and several liability is recognized in many countries, but the details can vary. Some legal systems limit its application, while others apply it broadly. It's important to understand the rules in your jurisdiction, especially if you're involved in international business or cross-border transactions. When entering contracts, parties can negotiate the type of liability that will apply. This may involve limiting liability to several only, or specifying how joint and several liability will be handled. Legal advice is often recommended to ensure that the terms are fair and clearly understood by all parties. Having legal representation is crucial when dealing with joint and several liability. Lawyers can help draft agreements, explain the risks, and represent clients in disputes. They can also advise on strategies to minimize exposure and ensure that liability is shared fairly among all parties. Environmental laws often impose joint and several liability on polluters. If multiple companies contribute to contamination, anyone can be required to pay for the entire cleanup. This ensures that the environment is restored, even if some polluters are out of business or cannot be found. The paying company can then seek reimbursement from the others. In product liability cases, manufacturers, distributors, and retailers may all be held jointly and severally liable for injuries caused by defective products. This allows injured consumers to recover damages from any party in the supply chain, ensuring that compensation is available even if some parties are insolvent. In medical malpractice cases, multiple healthcare providers may be found jointly and severally liable for patient harm. This ensures that patients can recover damages from any provider involved, even if some are uninsured or unable to pay. Providers may then seek contribution from each other based on their level of responsibility. When multiple parties are involved in financial fraud, joint and several liability allows victims to recover their losses from any one perpetrator. This is especially important if some fraudsters cannot be located or have no assets. The paying party can then pursue the others for their share of the damages. In employment law, joint and several liability can apply when multiple employers are responsible for wage violations or workplace injuries. Employees can recover the full amount owed from any employer, ensuring that their rights are protected even if some employers are insolvent or unavailable. Joint and several liability can also arise in intellectual property cases, such as copyright or trademark infringement. If multiple parties are found liable, the rights holder can recover damages from any one of them, ensuring that their intellectual property is protected and compensated. In landlord-tenant disputes, joint and several liability may apply when multiple tenants sign a lease. If one tenant fails to pay rent, the landlord can demand the full amount from the others. This protects the landlord's interests but increases the risk for co-tenants, making it important to choose roommates wisely. Debt collectors often rely on joint and several liability to recover the full amount owed from any one debtor. This increases the chances of successful collection, especially if some debtors are unable to pay. The paying debtor can then seek reimbursement from the others, but the creditor is not left at a loss. In family law, joint and several liability can apply to child support or alimony obligations when multiple parties are responsible. This ensures that the recipient receives the full amount owed, even if one responsible party cannot pay. The paying party can then seek contribution from the others. Tax authorities may impose joint and several liability on spouses or business partners for unpaid taxes. This allows the government to collect the full amount from any responsible party, ensuring that tax debts are paid even if one party is unable to contribute. In securities law, joint and several liability can apply to parties involved in fraudulent stock offerings or misrepresentations. Investors can recover losses from any responsible party, ensuring that wrongdoing is addressed and compensation is available. Antitrust laws may impose joint and several liability on companies involved in price fixing or other anti-competitive practices. This allows victims, such as consumers or competitors, to recover damages from any one company, promoting accountability and deterring illegal conduct. In bankruptcy cases, joint and several liability can affect how creditors recover debts. If one debtor is bankrupt, creditors can pursue the others for the full amount. This ensures that debts are paid, but can increase the burden on solvent co-debtors. In shipping and logistics, joint and several liability can apply to carriers, shippers, and consignees for lost or damaged goods. Any one party may be held responsible for the full value, ensuring that losses are covered and goods owners are compensated. Let's visualize how joint and several liability works. Imagine three parties are responsible for a $90,000 debt. Under joint and several liability, the creditor can demand the full amount from any one party. If party A pays the entire $90,000, they can then seek $30,000 each from parties B and C. This schematic helps clarify how responsibility and reimbursement operate in practice. Joint and several liability is a powerful legal tool that ensures injured parties or creditors can recover the full amount owed, even if some responsible parties cannot pay. While it offers strong protection for plaintiffs, it can increase risk for defendants. Understanding how it works is essential for anyone entering agreements or facing potential legal claims. To sum up, joint and several liability plays a crucial role in law by balancing the interests of plaintiffs and defendants. It ensures that victims are compensated, while also encouraging parties to carefully consider the risks before entering agreements. By understanding this concept, you can better protect yourself and make informed decisions in both personal and professional contexts.